Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyrnor as always, and today I'm going to talk to you about the new Durotan novel written by Gul'dan, which is a prequel to the Warcraft movie. Now, there has been a lot of criticism on the idea of the novel. Why are we getting another orc novel? Why are we getting another Durotan novel, since Durotan's character is so well established within the lore? And those are understandable criticisms. And there's also the criticism that this novel would end up being another Rise of the Horde. Well, now the novel is out, so I suppose we should see how well those criticisms hold up. First of all, I would like to say that, like Gul'dan had previously said, this novel is definitely not a Rise of the Horde, and in several different ways. Rise of the Horde was the story of imperil the orcs and the Draenei during the time of the Rise of the Horde, as well as portraying the various events and manipulations on the part of Gul'dan and the demons that led to the Rise of the Horde and the downfall of the Draenei and of Draenor in general. This book, however, is just the story of Durotan and the Frostwolf clan. In Rise of the Horde, Durotan and the Frostwolf clan were also the main characters, but this book focuses exclusively on them, and we see events exclusively through their lens. And another important thing to note about this book is that the society of the orcs and the overall geography of Draenor is very different from what it is in the actual lore. Keeping in mind that this book is just a prequel for the movie, which has been stated to be quote-unquote non-canon comparatively to the games, the other expanded universe, and so on. So, what exactly is different? Well, first of all, orcs are a lot more isolationist. They're organized in isolated clans, and they're a lot more isolated than they were previously before the Rise of the Horde in the normal canon, so to say. At least in the normal canon, they had various events, celebrations in which they came together. They had several spiritual leaders, which everyone acknowledged as universal symbols, for example Ner'zhul or even his apprentice Gul'dan. But in this book, every orc clan is a very isolated entity, and the occasion of two clans meeting is a very different one, a very strange one. They even have there's even a special ritual for the orcs, the Ritual of Parler, which amused me, in which a stranger comes to comes to a clan's camp only to talk, and there's a special ritual. The gist of it is, this stranger comes only to talk, we should not kill him. So this is a pretty different world, and it is also different in the terms of geography. First of all, you can sort of scrap the old map of Draenor. The Draenor in the movie universe is described as follows, sort of. It's basically divided, the planet of Draenor is divided into its northern regions and its southern regions. The south is more bountiful, is richer and more varied, while the north is pretty much Frostfire Ridge, and that's all it is. And the Frostwolf clan live in the north and are very isolated to the other orc clans. And it is also important to note that Frostfire Ridge is separated from the rest of the world, the southern part of the world, by a large mountain which was named, I think, the Great Father Mountain, if I am not mistaken. And the Frostwolf clan are notable in this book because they have had very little contact with other clans, although they obviously know of the existence of other clans. And really the only clan they had contact with was the Thunderlord clan, and that contact ceased at one point before the events of the book, which I'll probably get into later. So the geography is different, like I said. I also forgot to mention that in the southern regions, we know that Tanaan jungle exists, and that it is now a desert thanks to all the shenanigans that are happening. Now, without going into too many spoilers, what did I think about the book? Well, I thought that it was actually a very compelling book, despite the fact that the end result was kind of known because there are trailers of the movie out, even if the movie is not itself out. It is still very competently presented by Gul'dan, and if you are willing to accept that this book is different from the game's canon and accept that things within this book do not apply to the game's universe, only to the movie's universe, I think you'll find that it is a very enjoyable read, even if you might be oversaturated with the amount of orc lore there is, which I would not blame you, but like I said previously, orcish society in this book is fairly different from orcish society in the game's universe. Now, one last thing I would like to mention before I move into entire spoiler territory is that magic is also kind of different in this universe. Although not very different. Shamans still do what shamans do, albeit there are some differences which I'll talk about later. But as a minor spoiler, Gul'dan appears at one point, and he starts talking about how he has the magic and how his magic is the best. So magic is really treated as somewhat of a different entity compared to how it was in our universe. In our universe, magic was obviously special, but it was still considered to be a part of sort of ordinary life. While in this universe, other than shamanistic magic, which is still pretty odd, every other form of magic is considered to be very alien. At least from the point of view of the Frostwolf orcs at this point in the timeline. And we do not know how the humans will be unless we take into account what we know of this universe. We do not know what the other orcs think or believe about magic, other than the bits and snippets we do receive through the novel. And yeah, would I recommend the novel? Well, like I said, it is an enjoyable read, a very enjoyable read. I would add. I finished it in just one night actually. And because of how enjoyable it was. It is not important to the game story at all. It doesn't contribute anything to the game story since it contradicts the game story. Does it contribute to the movie story? Would you be better off having read the book while watching the movie? I cannot tell you that because the movie is not out yet. So, I would say a cautious yes when it comes to recommending this book. It is a very good read at the very least. I do not know how important it will be, like I said, but Christie Gul'dan is, as always, a very good writer. Now, moving into spoiler territory, I suppose I should talk about the overall plot of the book. The book begins with Durotan in his youth, and as he's instructed by his father Garad. And at the most noticeable thing about the overall plot of this book is that the central theme of the book is how Draenor is slowly dying. Unlike how it was in Rise of the Horde, where the death of Draenor, the planet, was pretty much a backdrop compared to the major events that were happening. But in this book, it is the catalyst of the book's events. It is the main event of the book. It is the book itself in many ways. So the book starts with Durotan being trained by his father, and like I mentioned, it's said how the winters are slowly becoming longer and how the climate is slowly worsening. And at one point, Gul'dan himself shows up in camp, and he invokes the ancient rite that I spoke of Parler, which the Frostwolf orcs find very weird. He speaks about how the south is in a much worse condition than the north is, how everyone is starving in the south, and as proof he brings a fruit which he cuts open, and everyone finds that it is dead inside, that it has no seeds. And he invites all of the Frostwolf clan to join his horde. That's another thing that is important to mention, the fact that the horde in the movies universe is pretty much entirely said to be, oh yeah, this is Gul'dan's horde. Unlike in the games universe, where Gul'dan was just manipulating things from behind the scenes. So the Frostwolf clan then refuses to accept being part of the horde because of how independent they are, and because of how they pretty much do not trust Gul'dan at all. Gul'dan already came to the Frostwolf camp with promises of, hey, let's go to this other world where pretty much animals will fight to die for you and fruits fall from the trees and all of that good stuff. And the Frostwolves naturally don't really believe him. However, he does do a little thing in which part of the ritual is the stranger which came brings with him a knife, and the chieftain of the hosting clan cuts himself with the knife to show, we're friends, even though you brought this knife, you did not use it against me and all that good stuff. But Gul'dan actually poisons his knife, and as a result, Garad, the father of Durotan, will die. Now, he will not die from the poison itself, he will die in battle against other orcs. You might recall that I mentioned previously that the Frostwolf clan is isolated from the rest of the world, and there are no really other orcs with the exception of the Thunderlords. And the Thunderlords are not the antagonists of this book. In fact, they only really appear once or twice. The main antagonists of this book are the so-called Red Walkers. The Red Walkers are orcs which have grown desperate from the lack of food and have turned to cannibalism, basically. And they refused Gul'dan's offer to join the Horde, theoretically speaking, so to say, and coat themselves with the blood of those they slay, and are really described throughout this book in the book as almost unequivocally evil until the very end. And really, they are pretty much entirely despicable throughout the book. So the Red Walkers lured the Frostwolves into an attack and managed to slay Garad because of the poison that Gul'dan had infected him with, and Durotan is now the chieftain of the Frostwolf clan. It is also worth mentioning, like you might have heard previously, that Orgrim Doomhammer in this universe is a member of the Frostwolf clan and is not a member of the Blackrock clan. At first I was kind of opposed to this idea, because the whole idea of Durotan and Orgrim Doomhammer's relationship and why it was special was precisely because they were of different clans, and different clans weren't really supposed to mix. But in this universe, in which clans are a lot more isolated, it does make sense why Doomhammer would have to be from Durotan's clan, otherwise they really would never have met. I should probably mention the Thunderlords to sort of clear them off. The Thunderlords are living in a sort of... They're near the Frostwolf territory, they're neighbors, so to say, although they don't interact much at all. They sometimes collaborated on hunting parties, but there was an event several years before the events of the book in which there was a dispute between a Thunderlord orc and a Frostwolf orc regarding a kill, and a Mak'gora, a duel to the death, was invoked, and the Thunderlord orc died, and thus the two clans have never interacted since, because there's obviously a sort of coldness between the two from now. Now moving on to continuing with the plot, Durotan becomes the chieftain of the Frostwolf clan, like I mentioned, and Orgrim Doomhammer becomes his second in command. His mother, Gaia, the wife of Garad, continues to live throughout the book. In fact, she survives the book, which I was kind of surprised by. And she's actually the lore keeper of the clan. She's the one who keeps all of the clan's traditions, all of the clan's sacred scrolls, and so on. And actually was the one who was, outside of Garad, the only one who knew what Parler even meant when Gul'dan invoked it. So Durotan is advised by those people, and he is also advised by Drek'thar, who in this book, unlike in Rise of the Horde, is completely blind. He was not blind yet in Rise of the Horde. Well, it depends on who you ask, really. And it's actually kind of interesting how Drek'thar is portrayed throughout the book, since he requires aid to walk, while in our universe he never really required an aid. Well, he did have one, but he is much more dependent upon an aid in this book, and he is obviously much better connected to the spirits and the elements than the other shamans, but he nonetheless does not see, obviously, and in contrast with our universe, in which even though he did not have eyes, he still knew what was in front of him, so to say. One other thing that it is notable to mention is the difference between shamanism in the book and in our universe. In our universe, shamanism is pretty much just another form of magic, and just that the source is different. You ask the elements for aid, and they give it or they don't give it to you, and instead and for that you thank them and you perform rites for them, and so on and so forth. While in this book, the elements are portrayed as sort of a lot more vulnerable to the influence of orcs, of mortals, so to say, than normally, and they even have a sort of throne of the elements, like you can find in Nagrand in our universe, only that the quote-unquote throne of the elements is pretty much at the North Pole of the planet. And pretty much because the throne of the elements, so to say, was tainted by the Red Walkers, is explained to be the reason why Draenor is dying. At least it is explained to be this reason in this book. I would like to mention the fact that that the connection between Gul'dan and the Red Walkers is implied at several points throughout the book, including but not limited to the death of Garad, and the fact that every shaman, in the book, when he looks at Gul'dan, says, oh, this one walks with death behind him, and all that good stuff, and the spirits of the elements always avoid Gul'dan, and so on and so forth. Similar to how they avoid the Red Walkers. The plot moves on as the environment becomes harsher and harsher, and the Frostwolves are forced to take more and more draconic, so to say, measures in order to survive, until one point the Great Father Mountain that I mentioned previously erupts, turns into a volcano, and the Frostwolves are forced to abandon their home with many dead and most of their property lost, and they are forced to travel north, pretty much with only the clothes on their backs. And I realized that I forgot to mention something, and that is the character of Drek'thar. Drek'thar, as is the case in our universe, is Durotan's wife. However, in this particular universe, Drek'thar is an exile from the Frostwolf clan. The Frostwolf clan have a right in case someone is too weak to be part of the clan. He or she is exiled, and at set points throughout the year, the exiles, if they survive, are allowed to return and prove their strength to the clan. And Drek'thar returns to the clan 2 years after she is exiled, and she is pretty much becomes the main advisor to Durotan and eventually his mate. One thing to note is that Drek'thar traveled throughout Draenor during her exile and met with all of the other clans, and she even met with the Draenei during her exile and has acquired several skills from the other clans, and she is in many ways throughout the book not one of the only liaisons we have with the outside world. Speaking of the outside world, like I mentioned previously, this is the story of the Frostwolf clan. However, what we do know of the outside world is, like I said, seen through the lens of the Frostwolves. And what we do know is, like I said, the outside world is dying even worse than the lands of the Frostwolves, and Gul'dan is uniting them under his horde, and shamans are slowly being replaced by warlocks because the spirits of the elements will not answer the orcs anymore. But unlike our universe, the spirits of the elements are trying to reach the orcs. They did not abandon the orcs, but the interference of the Red Walkers at the North Pole, so to say, is making their influence even weaker and weaker than as the book goes on, to the point where shamans almost entirely lose their powers. Excuse me. And Gul'dan is slowly gathering the orc clans, and it's mentioned that at the end of the book, only the Frostwolves and the Red Walkers are the ones who still have not joined Gul'dan's horde. But like I said, the Red Walkers are implied to have a connection with Gul'dan, so who knows how true that claim is. Anyway, as the book goes on and the Frostwolves are forced to leave their ancestral home, and they travel north to a haven which Drek'thar encountered during her travels, and it is also a place where Draenei are known to frequent sometimes. And one thing to mention is that Draenei barely appear throughout the book, and in the cases that they do appear, they are not hostile to the orcs. There's only 2 cases in which hostility is implied. Firstly, when Gul'dan shows up in the Frostwolf village, the Durotan wonders, are those Draenei scrolls that he has? But it is mostly a passing comment. And in regards to the Red Walkers, because the Red Walkers, the cannibals, eat and fight and kill anybody, whether they be orc, Draenei, or beast, and they hunt the Draenei as well. Times continue to be tough for the Frostwolves. It is also worth mentioning that throughout the book there are several Red Walker attacks with more and more casualties. At one point, Gul'dan returns to the Frostwolf village and again offers them to rejoin the horde. But Durotan once again refuses because Drek'thar and the spirits of the elements advise him, look, this guy is clearly evil, he clearly has an evil agenda. And it is also worth mentioning that the Frostwolf clan does not practice slavery, but it is mentioned that other orc clans practice slavery. Why am I saying this? Because Gul'dan on both occasions came to the Frostwolf village with a slave attached to a chain, and that slave was Garona. Garona's portrayal throughout the novel is a bit odd, but also pretty interesting, although it obviously does not really lead anywhere, and we will have to see how her development leads up in the movies. Garona follows Gul'dan's orders and is pretty much her pet slave, so to say. But it is clearly described that she has very independent, so to say, eyes, and she is openly defiant of anyone who looks at her, except for the Gul'dan himself. And at one point during Gul'dan's second visit to the Frostwolf village, he even warns the Frostwolves in the Draenei language. She warns Drek'thar and says, "My master is very dark and very dangerous. Be careful of him." And Garona is this fiery slave that is constantly defiant of her master. And throughout the book, all of the Frostwolves wonder, why does Gul'dan keep bringing Garona with him to the Frostwolf village? A question which is not really answered throughout the book. After Gul'dan's second invitation, the Frostwolves start becoming more and more resentful of Durotan's rule because they are pretty much starving and Gul'dan is offering a way out. And a group of Frostwolves try to persuade Durotan to let them join the horde. However, the leader of the group challenges Durotan to a duel, and Durotan defeats him, obviously, but spares the guy's life, only to find out later on that the specific orc took his family and another family and tried to travel south. Durotan and his pal, so to say, travel in search of the missing orcs and find out that they had been attacked by Red Walkers. And 2 of the orcs are dead, the wolves of the orcs are dead, but most of the deserters and their children are brought to safety back to the Frostwolf encampment. Although this is also the first time that we discovered that the Red Walkers eat orcs, so it is an important part in the book. This is also the only moment where Draenei appear in the book, other than being mentioned, as as the Red Walkers were attacking the deserters, the children of the deserters fled from the attack and were rescued by Draenei, and the Draenei were those who brought the children back to the Frostwolf village. And they are treated as honored guests and pretty much party with the Frostwolves, although it is a very short scene. It is interesting, like I mentioned previously, how the Draenei are not exactly hostile to the orcs other than the Red Walkers. The story continues on as like I said, Draenor is continuing to worsen. The winters are becoming longer. Food is becoming more and more scarce. At one point, there's a giant sinkhole is revealed near the Frostwolf encampment, and several orcs die when the sinkhole pretty much swallows them, and the orcs are forced to move further north. And it is also notable how throughout the book the elements are responding more and more slowly to the shamans' pleas for help. They still occasionally help the shamans, but they talk to them less and less. And it is revealed why, like I mentioned previously, that the Red Walkers are defiling the seat of the elements. So the Frostwolf clan travels further north in accordance with also their ancient traditions, because they know that the quote-unquote North Pole is the seat of the elements, the throne of the elements, and they know that the closer they get to there, the easier it will be to talk to the spirits. And at one point, nearing the climax of the book, Durotan discovers that at a point ahead in their path, the ground itself is on fire, and it is sort of revealed how the elements themselves, because they are dying, they are starting to cannibalize off of each other. How water caused the sinkhole that swallowed much of the Frostwolf village. How fire is now eating the earth. How fire once again started the volcano that destroyed the original Frostwolf village, and so on. And Durotan, accompanied by Drek'thar and his Gaia and 2 or 3 other orcs, decide to go on alone to the seat of the elements and leave the majority of the clan behind, with Orgrim Doomhammer in charge. And they go to the seat of the elements. They discover the Red Walkers. They kill several Red Walkers. And Drek'thar then communes with the spirits within the heart of an iceberg, I would say. Although, I guess you could call it an iceberg. And it is there that he finds out that the elements are actually dying, and fire, earth, and water are already pretty much dead. Air is barely hanging on, and life will be the last to die. Although the spirits tell Drek'thar that they are dying, but it is not death in the way orcs see it, so to say. And the spirits tell Drek'thar, no matter where you go, no matter what planet you go to, you will always find the spirits of the elements of air, water, earth, fire, and life in that place, which serves as a sort of impetus for Durotan eventually agreeing to join the Horde. The climax of the book pretty much reveals that the Red Walkers were waiting for the Frostwolves to ambush them, and while the Durotan's party was distracted at the North Pole, the main Red Walker clan attacked the Frostwolf village. There weren't any casualties in the Red Walker attack, because the Red Walkers are only trying to wound the Frostwolves so they can eat them. But the climax of the book finishes with all of the Red Walker orcs except their chieftain as dead. Durotan captures the Red Walker chieftain and interrogates him. The Red Walker pretty much explains his clan story of how, because of the worsening climate, they had to resort to first covering themselves in blood, and then they had to fend off a Draenei hunting party and began eating the Draenei, and how basically the dominoes continued falling. And then he makes an offer to Durotan. Look, both of our clans are very independent, and both of us do not want to join Gul'dan. So how about we join forces and become the Red Wolves and continue terrorizing Draenor with our cannibalism, but surviving? And Durotan and the rest of the Frostwolves are enraged at this proposition and kill the Red Walker chieftain. And Durotan makes the decision to join the Horde, but he makes the mention that he will never, so to say, listen to Gul'dan's dark magics, and the Frostwolf clan will always be independent within the Horde. That is the pledge that Durotan makes, and that is how the book itself ends. Now, like I mentioned previously, the relationship between the Red Walkers and Gul'dan is still very much unclear. A connection between them is implied at several points, and it is clear that there is a connection, although the words of the Red Walker chieftain are completely... they don't match with this supposed connection, although he could obviously be lying. But in this novel, there are no mentions of demons. Warlocks are only mentioned in passing and only when referring to Gul'dan himself. And there are, like I said, no demons. The Frostwolf clan retains its shamanistic identity, and this book is, like you just saw, entirely about the Frostwolf clan and not about the rise of the Horde like the Rise of the Horde novel was. So yeah, that is the story synopsis of the book. Those are my thoughts on the book. Like I said, I would cautiously recommend it. I do not know how important it is to understanding the movie. Like you pretty much realize, and how I explained it to you, Orc society in this book is pretty different from Orc society in our universe, although not very different. And I do not know how important those differences will be in understanding the movie. Although, obviously, the movie should be tailored to the understanding of the masses, the hoi polloi, so to say. As to if this book is written for, so to say, those uneducated with Warcraft's lore, I would say that it is definitely, obviously, very relatable to someone who knows Warcraft's lore, like myself. Trying to look at it from someone who doesn't know anything about Warcraft is a bit difficult, but not impossible. I would say the main fault of the book is that in regards to the understanding of the hoi polloi and not those who know Warcraft, is that the book does not describe at all how orcs look or what orcs are. And it is understandable why it would not describe it, because every Warcraft player knows what an orc is, but someone unfamiliar does not. You might make the argument that, hey, they will see the movie and then they will buy the book, and it is an understandable argument, but that is my main criticism of the book, and it is not a major criticism. The book is very enjoyable, a very enjoyable read, a very exciting read. Well, probably not as exciting now that I've spoiled it, but yeah. So these are my thoughts on the Durotan novel. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.